A shocking discovery can turn an ordinary day upside down. For one young girl, recognizing a familiar face in a grand manor's portrait sparked an impossible mystery. She identified the boy as Eli, a quiet friend from her orphanage who had vanished years ago. Yet, the billionaire owner claimed the child in the painting had died a decade prior, leaving everyone stunned. But how did this astonishing revelation come to pass? Our story truly begins earlier that day, long before the portrait's unsettling truth emerged. Loretta Davis, a seasoned cleaner, understood the unspoken rules of her demanding profession within opulent homes. Discretion was paramount, and certain boundaries were never to be crossed. Among these strict guidelines was the imperative to keep her daughter, Zara, away from any unauthorized sections of the sprawling mansions. Such was the life of a domestic worker. On this particular morning, as the sun barely crested the horizon, Loretta guided her well-worn Honda into the staff entrance of the impressive Westmore Manor. This estate was her workplace of 6 months. Despite her tenure, the sheer grandeur of the white stone and towering windows still made her feel insignificant. Today, however, brought an added layer of discomfort. Her 12-year-old daughter, Zara, sat beside her, clutching a backpack and gazing wide-eyed at the vast property. This was an unusual, unplanned visit. Loretta switched off the engine and firmly reminded Zara of the protocols. "Remember what I told you," she instructed. "You must stay in the staff kitchen, touch nothing, and absolutely do not wander." Zara, with a serious expression on her young face, acknowledged her mother's words. "Yes, Mama," she affirmed, understanding the gravity of the situation. The local school had closed unexpectedly due to a burst pipe, leaving Loretta with no alternative but to bring Zara along to her job. It was a choice she disliked immensely. She detested the feeling of blurring the lines between her professional and personal worlds, violating an unwritten code of separation. Yet, what other options did she have? Leaving Zara unattended in their modest apartment was simply not an option. So, mother and daughter proceeded together through the service entrance. Their footsteps echoed on the gleaming marble floors as they entered the bustling morning kitchen. The head housekeeper, Miss Pennington, noticed their arrival. Her thin lips tightened into a clear expression of disapproval as she looked up from her clipboard. "Mrs. Davis, I wasn't aware you'd be bringing," she began, her tone sharp. Loretta swiftly interjected, explaining the situation. "It's an emergency, ma'am. School dismissed early, so she'll remain in the kitchen, causing no disturbance." Miss Pennington's light blue eyes critically scanned Zara, noting her worn sneakers and the patched jacket she was wearing. "Ensure she doesn't," the housekeeper sternly replied. "Mr. Westmore dislikes any kind of disruption." Loretta simply affirmed, "Yes, ma'am." As Miss Pennington walked away, a younger housemaid named Sophie leaned in close to another colleague, sharing a quiet whisper. Zara overheard the hushed words, "Maid's kid," and a flush of humiliation spread across her cheeks. Though she had faced worse, the sting of such a label still hurt deeply. Loretta quickly found Zara a small, secluded table in the corner of the kitchen, providing her with a book and a granola bar. "I'll come back to check on you every hour," Loretta promised. "If you need anything, just ask Marie," she added, indicating a kind-faced older cook who offered Zara a warm smile. "I'll be fine, Mama," Zara reassured her mother, trying to appear brave and self-sufficient. Loretta gave her daughter's shoulder a gentle squeeze before disappearing into the main part of the house to commence her duties. For the initial hour, Zara diligently followed instructions. She immersed herself in her book, ate her snack, and observed the kitchen staff's synchronized movements. However, her innate curiosity soon took over. This trait had always defined her, even during her time in the orphanage after her father's death. She constantly sought to discover what lay beyond. Seizing an opportunity when Marie's back was turned, Zara quietly slipped out of the kitchen, drawn by the sound of voices echoing down a long, painting-lined corridor. The mansion's interior surpassed its exterior grandeur. Towering ceilings held sparkling crystal chandeliers, seemingly touching the sky above. Thick, plush carpets silenced her footsteps, and every surface gleamed flawlessly, as if completely untouched by dust. Zara passed a group of maids polishing silver in a sitting room. Their conversation ceased abruptly, and their gazes followed her with a familiar, scrutinizing look. Continuing her journey, Zara navigated through opulent rooms, each seemingly crafted solely to house priceless artifacts. Suddenly, a sharp, authoritative voice pierced the mansion's quiet, resonating from a distance. It was Miss Pennington, her words cutting through the air. Your excuses are irrelevant. The East Wing is strictly off-limits. There are no exceptions, she continued. Mr. Westmore has made that perfectly clear to everyone. Cautiously rounding a corner, Zara observed Miss Pennington sternly lecturing a young maintenance employee. Beyond the exchange, a formidable set of double doors remained sealed, electronic security locks glinting on either side. Directly above these doors, a small surveillance camera vigilantly monitored the hallway below. The East Wing, Zara thought, a sudden chill tracing a path down her spine. She wondered what profound secrets could justify such an extensive and elaborate security system. Quickly retreating to avoid detection, Zara slipped away down a different, much quieter corridor. This passage was adorned with formal portraits of stern-faced individuals dressed in antiquated attire. At its conclusion, an open doorway beckoned, spilling a comforting, warm glow into the hall. Peeking inside, she discovered a magnificent study, boasting floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a grand desk. Drawn by its inviting warmth, Zara entered. The room felt genuinely lived in, with papers, coffee, and glasses on a desk, and a portrait above the mantelpiece. Compelled forward, Zara approached the painting of a serious young boy in an ill-fitting navy suit, clutching a detailed wooden sailboat. His piercing eyes instantly struck her as familiar. Zara's breath hitched, and she instinctively leaned closer, her hand reaching out towards the canvas. Eli, she whispered, the name barely audible, though her mind insisted it couldn't possibly be him. The boy depicted seemed too refined, too privileged, yet those familiar eyes and the slight tilt of his head were undeniable. The protective, gentle way his fingers curved around the tiny wooden boat also stirred a deep, forgotten memory within her. Zara recalled her year at the children's home after her father's death, before her mother could finally bring her back. There, she had known a brilliant, quiet boy who constantly sketched boats and whom other children simply called Eli. He never revealed his true name, appearing mysteriously late one night and vanishing just as suddenly weeks later. Zara was among the few he ever spoke to, and they developed a secret communication, tapping signals between their rooms after dark. She had taught him checkers, and in return, he showed her how to craft intricate paper ships. But Eli was always fearful, constantly glancing over his shoulder, plagued by nightmares of cold water and dark places. His eyes, just like those in the portrait, carried the same profound sadness that had always haunted her. As her fingers brushed the painting's frame, a sudden, booming voice shattered the silence, making her heart pound. "What are you doing in here?" the man demanded, startling Zara, who instantly withdrew her hand and spun around. Standing in the doorway was a tall, imposing man, his expensive dark suit and graying temples exuding authority. It was Graham Westmore, his stress-lined face and piercing gaze, far more intense than any picture, made Zara stammer an apology. Zara quickly offered her apologies, explaining she hadn't intended to intrude. Graham's voice remained cold and controlled as he pressed. "How did you get in here? Where's your mother?" She responded, "She's working, sir. I'm Zara Davis. I didn't touch anything." But he cut her off, questioning, "Just what?" "Exploring where you don't belong." As Graham stepped further into the room, Zara noticed his gaze momentarily fix on the portrait. A fleeting flicker of pain crossed his features before he quickly masked it. However, her initial fear quickly gave way to a familiar surge of conviction, the same inner strength that had always made her speak up against injustice. Turning back to the painting, her hand now trembling slightly, Zara bravely declared, "Sir, this boy lived with me in the orphanage." An absolute silence descended upon the room, broken only by the frantic beat of Zara's own heart and the distant hum of a vacuum cleaner. When she finally looked at Graham again, his face was utterly drained of color, and his hand instinctively clutched the edge of his desk for support. His lips parted, but no sound emerged at first, until he managed a barely audible whisper. "That's not possible." Zara's words spilled out in a rush. I know it sounds unbelievable, but I'm telling you the truth. 2 years ago, at Riverside Children's Home, his name was Eli. At least, that's what we called him. She continued. He was a quiet, exceptionally bright boy who adored boats, constantly drawing them. And he even had a toy sailboat just like this one. She gestured towards the painting. Graham seemed to lose all strength, collapsing into his desk chair, his knuckles turning white from how tightly he gripped the wooden armrest. With a profound sadness, he revealed, "This is my son, Nathaniel Westmore. He passed away 10 years ago." Zara, stunned by his words, could only repeat, "But sir, he died?" Graham's voice fractured as he explained, "It was an accident. He was only 8 years old. They found pieces of the boat, but..." He couldn't finish the tragic sentence. Tears welled in Zara's own eyes, yet she insisted, "I'm not lying. I would never lie about something like this." Zara continued her explanation, describing the boy she knew as Eli, who was around 9 or 10 when they met. She recalled his terrible nightmares, where he would scream about cold water and someone holding him beneath the surface. These frightening episodes were so frequent that the staff often had to intervene to soothe him almost every evening. Graham's head suddenly shot up, a flicker of intense interest in his eyes, and he demanded, "What?" Zara explained that Eli was constantly afraid but never revealed the reason for his terror. He consistently spoke of someone promising to find him and his father coming to rescue him. Zara's voice softened to a whisper as she admitted, "I remember because it made me sad. My father was dead. I knew he wasn't coming back, but Eli believed his was still out there." Suddenly, the door burst open, and Loretta rushed in, her face etched with panic. Graham cut her off with a raised hand, his voice now sounding empty and distant. "Mrs. Davis," he stated, "take your daughter, please." "Yes, sir. Right away, sir," Loretta stammered, grabbing Zara's arm and pulling her urgently towards the exit. "I'm so sorry. This won't happen again." As they hurried away, Zara faintly heard Graham's voice behind them, so quiet she almost missed it. He wasn't speaking to them, but to the portrait. "Then, who was buried in your place?" His haunting question followed Zara as she was led through the house and out to the car. Her mother remained silent during the drive, her jaw tight and hands gripping the steering wheel, while Zara's mind reeled with the impossible revelation. Zara's mind raced, fixated on the boy in the portrait, his sorrowful eyes, and the paper boats, grappling with the impossible words she had uttered. She couldn't shake the image of Graham Westmore's face, realizing she had unearthed a monumental secret, buried for a decade, into the harsh light of day. 3 days had now passed since Zara stood in that study, speaking truths that should have been utterly inconceivable. It had been 3 days since she witnessed the composed mask of a billionaire shatter like fragile ice over profound depths. Since that day, her mother had carefully avoided taking Zara back to the mansion, arranging alternatives whenever her work called. Yet, the silence emanating from Westmore Manor felt more deafening and impactful than any direct response could have been. That evening, Loretta moved through their small apartment with almost robotic precision, tidying up after dinner, speaking only when absolutely necessary. Her daughter, Zara, sat at the kitchen table, her homework laid out before her, but her pencil hadn't stirred for a full 15 minutes. "Mama," Zara finally broke the silence, her voice small. "Are you going to lose your job because of me?" Loretta's hands froze in the sudsy water, and she murmured, "I don't know, baby. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have let you wander off. I shouldn't have said anything." But then she shook her head, turning to Zara. "No," Loretta declared. "You told the truth. You never apologized for telling the truth." She sat opposite Zara, her expression softening, and urged, "But the boy in the painting. Tell me again," Loretta interrupted, "everything you remember about Eli. Don't leave anything out." So Zara began, recounting the orphanage, the cramped rooms, and thin blankets, explaining how Eli arrived mysteriously 2 years prior, drawing only boats. "He had this toy," Zara added, tracing invisible shapes on the table. "A small wooden sailboat, chipped and faded, but he treasured it." Loretta gasped, her voice catching. "What color was the paint on that boat?" she pressed, her eyes wide with sudden intensity. Zara explained Eli's cherished wooden toy, a small sailboat he always kept with him, despite its worn paint. Loretta, holding her breath, asked about the boat's colors, and Zara described it as white and blue with a distinct red stripe. "Lord have mercy," Loretta whispered, then abruptly rose and paced, realizing the description perfectly matched the boat in the portrait. She insisted Zara knew the painting, having seen it countless times while cleaning, depicting a sad boy clutching that very boat. Loretta pressed her fingers to her temples, asking Zara, "And you're telling me you knew him? You lived with him?" Zara confirmed she wasn't lying. Loretta then turned to her daughter, stating, "I know you're not. That's what scares me." The following morning, Loretta went to work by herself, immediately sensing the uncomfortable stares and hushed conversations in the staff kitchen. Miss Pennington then appeared in the doorway, clutching her clipboard defensively, and sternly requested, "Mrs. Davis, a word." Loretta followed the head housekeeper into a small office, where Ms. Pennington carefully shut the door before confronting her. "I want to be clear about something," Miss Pennington began, her voice low and tense, explaining Mr. Westmore's immense tragedy of losing his son a decade prior. She condemned Zara's actions, calling her wild stories and impossible claims cruel and utterly inappropriate given his suffering. Loretta defended, "My daughter told the truth about what she experienced." Miss Pennington's hard gaze challenged, "Did she? Or did a child see a sad portrait and let her imagination run wild?" A surge of anger flared in Loretta as she retorted, "My daughter is not a liar." Miss Pennington simply countered, "Then she's confused." Either way, Miss Pennington continued with emphasis, "I strongly suggest you keep her away from here and keep her mouth shut about this entire incident." She stressed that Mr. Westmore had worked hard to move past his grief, and the household would not tolerate disruption from a child's unfounded claims. Loretta's instincts immediately bristled at Miss Pennington's tone, which sounded unnaturally composed and prescripted. Her words felt too rehearsed, as if Miss Pennington had anticipated this exact conversation and prepared for it. Sensing the discussion was over, Loretta quietly asked, "Is that all?" Miss Pennington replied curtly, "That's all. You may return to your duties." Loretta spent the remainder of the morning cleaning guest rooms on the second floor, her thoughts swirling with unease. Having worked in many affluent households, she understood how secrets were guarded and inconvenient truths swept aside. Yet, this particular situation felt different, imbued with a sense of deliberate orchestration rather than mere discretion. While changing linens in the blue room, her phone vibrated with an incoming call from an unknown number. She nearly ignored it, but an inexplicable impulse prompted her to answer. A formal, unfamiliar male voice greeted her, stating, "Mrs. Davis." "Yes, this is Robert, Mr. Westmore's personal assistant." He conveyed, "Mr. Westmore would like to speak with you in his study at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Please be prompt." The line disconnected abruptly before Loretta could even formulate a response. Punctually at 2 o'clock, Loretta gently knocked on the study door, the very room where Zara's revelation had irrevocably altered everything just days prior. Graham Westmore sat behind his desk, but he appeared diminished and weary, his eyes bloodshot as if from lack of sleep. The desk surface was covered with scattered papers, old photographs, and official-looking documents. "Sit down, please," he instructed her. Amidst the strewn papers and official documents, Graham Westmore, his eyes still bloodshot, simply commanded, "Sit down, please." Loretta took a seat, her posture straight and her hands clasped in her lap, a testament to her long-held practice of never displaying fear before powerful men. Graham then selected a photograph from the clutter and gently pushed it towards her. It depicted a smiling boy, no older than 7, with a delightful gap between his front teeth. Dressed in swim trunks and holding a boogie board, his bare feet were lightly dusted with sand. "That's Nathaniel," Graham stated. "Nate. We called him Nate. This was taken 6 months before he died." Loretta's heart tightened as she gazed at the image. It was undeniably the same face she had seen in the portrait, the very boy Zara had vividly described. Graham's voice was strained as he continued, "I need you to tell me everything your daughter shared. Every detail she remembers about this boy, Eli. I need to know if she's absolutely certain." "Mr. Westmore, please," he pleaded, his voice cracking with raw emotion. "Please, I need to know." Loretta then recounted Zara's entire story, observing Graham's face as it cycled through a spectrum of profound emotions, from horror and disbelief to desperate hope and yearning. A heavy silence followed her narration. After a long moment, Graham opened a desk drawer and retrieved more photographs. "Does she recall anything else?" he pressed. "Any other distinguishing features?" Loretta confirmed. She mentioned a small scar just above his right eyebrow. Graham's hand trembled as he slid another picture across the desk, a close-up of young Nate, with a distinct, thin scar visible above his eyebrow. "He got that when he was 4, Graham murmured. "Fell off his bike, needed 3 stitches. Loretta hesitated. "Mr. Westmore, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking my son's body was never found," he revealed. "I'm thinking the casket we buried held nothing but a few items from the boat wreckage. I'm thinking for 10 years, I believed what I was told because there was no reason not to." His eyes, burning with fierce and terrifying intensity, met Loretta's. "I'm thinking your daughter just told me my son might still be alive." The immense weight of his words hung in the air, almost too staggering to grasp. Loretta then slowly added, "The boy at the orphanage. Zara said he used to say something that made her sad." "What did he say?" Graham urged. "He said his father was coming. That his father promised to find him." Graham's breath caught in his throat. A sharp gasp escaped Graham. His hand flew to his chest, pressing hard against his heart. For a moment, Loretta feared he might collapse. With shaking hands, he reached for his phone. "I need to make a call," he said. "Please don't leave. I'll need to speak with you again." "Is your daughter home?" he asked. Loretta confirmed she was with a neighbor. "Bring her here. I must ask her myself. I need to see." He couldn't finish his sentence, but Loretta understood. He needed to look into Zara's eyes, to hear the impossible truth directly from the child. "I'll bring her," Loretta said quietly. Graham replied, "If she's wrong, I'll be where I've been for a decade. If she's right." He didn't need to finish. By the time Loretta returned with Zara, a new energy had settled in the study, a palpable shift in the atmosphere. A man in his 50s sat in a leather chair, silver-haired, and impeccably dressed in an expensive, understated suit. He rose as they entered, extending his hand to Loretta. "Martin Cole," he introduced, "a private investigator who worked Mr. Westmore's case 10 years ago." Zara stayed close to her mother's side, her eyes darting nervously between the two men, taking in the unfamiliar scene. Graham gestured to the sofa. "Please sit, Zara," he invited gently. "I want to ask you about the boy you knew. Is that all right?" Zara nodded, her voice barely audible as she whispered her agreement. "Yes, sir." For the next hour, Graham and Martin questioned her, proceeding gently but thoroughly through their inquiries. They showed her Nate's photographs. Zara identified his distinct smile and the particular way he tilted his head when concentrating. Next, they displayed Nate's childhood drawings of boats and water. Zara nodded vigorously, exclaiming, "Eli drew exactly like that." She added, "He always put little flags on the masts and he always drew." Her voice trailing off as she remembered more details. Continuing her description, Zara specified, "He always included small flags on the boat masts and consistently depicted birds soaring in the sky." Martin, diligently jotting down notes on a small pad, then inquired, "Did he ever speak about his family?" Zara hesitated, then replied quietly, "Not really. He seemed too afraid to discuss them." She recalled a specific instance. "Once, I asked him why he was still at the orphanage if his father was supposedly coming for him. He told me someone had claimed his father no longer wanted him, but he refused to believe it, certain it wasn't true." Graham reacted sharply, letting out a sound as if struck. He abruptly rose and walked to the window, turning his back to them, his shoulders visibly trembling. Martin gently cleared his throat before asking, "Zara, can you recall how Eli left the orphanage the last time you saw him?" Zara recounted that it was late one night when she heard voices in the corridor. Peeking out, she saw Eli being led away by a woman in a gray uniform, like a nurse. He was crying, clutching his boat, and looked back at her with a desperate plea. "Please don't send me back there," he had begged before they disappeared from her sight forever. Leaning forward intently, Martin pressed, "What did the woman look like? Do you remember any specific details?" Zara described her as tall with dark hair pulled back tightly, noting a distinct mark on her face, like a scar or a birthmark, pointing to her jaw near her ear. Graham spun around from the window so quickly he nearly toppled a lamp, demanding, "What did you say?" "A mark on her jaw?" His face paling, Graham slowly revealed. There was a woman like that at the marina the day Nate vanished, a new seasonal staff member who lingered near our boat. He touched his own jaw, confirming. She had a port wine birthmark right there, but she left the next day and never returned. I didn't think much of it then, being consumed by grief. Martin pressed, inquiring further. "Do you recall her name?" Graham shook his head, admitting he didn't, noting she simply vanished the next day. He hadn't considered it significant at the time, overwhelmed by what he believed was the tragic loss of his son, leaving him unable to elaborate further. With a grave expression, Martin rose, declaring his intention to retrieve his old case files. He believed employee records from the marina might hold the key to identifying this woman. Graham's voice was firm. "Do it. Do whatever is necessary. I don't care about the expense." Martin departed immediately, promising to call with any news. Loretta and Zara watched as Graham slowly slumped back into his chair, appearing utterly stunned, as if his entire world had just been upended. Finally turning to Zara, he expressed his deep gratitude. "Thank you for your courage in speaking out, for revealing the truth when no one else wished to hear it." Zara's voice was soft as she replied, "I just want Eli to be safe. He was my friend, always so sad. I wish he could come home." Graham's eyes welled up with emotion, his voice thick as he responded, "So do I." 2 days later, Martin Cole returned to Westmore Manor, his countenance so grim it sent a chill down Graham's spine. Without preamble, Martin announced, "The files are gone. Every single document pertaining to Nate's case has vanished, both physical and digital." Martin spread his hands in a gesture of helplessness, concluding, "Someone went to extreme lengths to ensure those files disappeared, orchestrating a highly sophisticated operation." Graham slowly grasped the implication, murmuring, "Then someone never wanted the truth about my son's disappearance to come to light." A chilling realization passed between the two men. This was no accident, but a decade-long cover-up, meticulously maintained for 10 years. Martin reassured him, stating he still had contacts who might recall details despite the missing records. He warned, however, that whoever buried the truth wouldn't appreciate it being unearthed now. Despite the warning, Graham was resolute, instructing Martin, "I don't care. Find out everything you can and follow every single lead." Once Martin had departed, Graham remained in his study, his gaze fixed on his son's portrait, Zara's words echoing in his mind. He remembered her description of the woman in the gray uniform, specifically the birthmark etched upon her jaw. Most disturbing were Nate's desperate words, "Please don't send me back there." Graham agonized over what there meant, desperate to know where his son had been held and who had taken him. The chilling truth was that someone had deliberately led him to believe his child was dead. He retrieved his phone, scrolling through old numbers until he found a name he hadn't dialed in 12 long years. It was Eleanor Westmore, his sister, with whom he'd had a profound falling out even before Nate's disappearance. Their bitter dispute over inheritance and the family legacy had caused her to sever ties and skip Nate's funeral, a slight he deeply resented. Yet, a horrifying new suspicion was now taking root in his mind, linking Eleanor to the unfolding mystery. Eleanor, with her history of hiring private staff, had once had full access to his life, coupled with a deep hatred for his inheritance of the Westmore fortune. He considered the possibility that her animosity was strong enough to orchestrate his destruction. He couldn't bring himself to make the call just yet, needing more concrete proof, though the seeds of doubt were firmly planted. The grim reality solidified. His son had been alive, hidden for years, terrified in unknown orphanages, while he mourned a false death. Graham Westmore, at 3 a.m., made a stark decision to uncover the truth, even if it shattered his entire perception of his family, as the portrait of Nate seemed to urge him forward. At 3 a.m., sitting in his study with an untouched glass of scotch, Graham Westmore made a firm decision to uncover the truth. Nate's portrait above the fireplace seemed to challenge him, pushing him to act. By dawn, he was already dressed and making urgent phone calls. Just 3 hours later, at 8 a.m., he arrived at Loretta Davis's modest apartment building. He knocked with such force that Loretta startled when she opened the door, still in her bathrobe. Without pleasantries, he declared, "We're going to the orphanage today." Loretta, her hair still wrapped, looked utterly bewildered by his sudden appearance and demand. She pointed out, "Sir, it's only 8 a.m. Zara has school, and I need to be at work by 9. Graham brushed aside her concerns, stating he would handle the school arrangements. He reminded her, "You are currently speaking with your employer." His tone softened slightly as he pleaded, "Please, Mrs. Davis, I desperately need to confirm your daughter's memories are real. I must see this place for myself." Something in his earnest expression must have convinced her. She silently stepped aside, allowing him entry into her small living room. Moments later, Zara appeared from the hallway in her pajamas, her eyes wide with surprise. Loretta quietly instructed her, "Mr. Westmore is here. Get dressed, we're taking a trip." Within the hour, they were all seated in Graham's sleek black Mercedes, heading through the city. Their destination, the Riverside Children's Home. In the front passenger seat, Martin Cole sat ready, a leather folder filled with potential questions resting on his lap. He was prepared to assist in the investigation. Zara sat between her mother and Graham in the back, her hands clasped tightly. She softly confided, "I haven't been back there since Mama took me out. I never thought I would." Graham asked if the place was bad, to which Zara replied it wasn't exactly bad, but just lonely. She explained that children there simply waited to be wanted. Some children found homes, others grew too old, and some, like Eli, simply vanished. Zara admitted, "I used to wonder where he went, if he was okay." Graham commended her bravery for returning to help him on this quest. Zara simply stated, "Eli was my friend. I want to help him." Her words struck Graham profoundly, like a physical blow to his chest. He fully grasped that his son, Eli, had had a true friend during those lost years. Graham was struck by a profound mix of emotions, a miracle that his son had lived and formed bonds, yet agony over his lost years. The group soon arrived at the Riverside Children's Home, a 3-story brick structure on the city's outskirts. Its exterior showed clear signs of neglect, with peeling paint, an overgrown lawn, and a general air of decay hanging about. Seeing the place, Graham's stomach churned, overwhelmed by the thought that his son had endured life within those dirty windows. Inside, they were met by director Patricia Hoffman, whose professional smile seemed strained as she greeted them. "We spoke on the phone," she acknowledged, "though I'm unsure how much help I can provide with your request for specific records." She guided them through a shabby entrance hall into an office redolent of stale coffee and printer paper. Graham cautiously explained, "His name might have been Eli. He would have been around 9 or 10, here about 2 years ago." A tense silence filled the room as Director Hoffman's fingers clicked across her keyboard, searching the database. Finally, she looked up, an apologetic expression on her face as she delivered the disappointing news. "I'm sorry, Mr. Westmore," she stated. "We have no records of any child named Eli from that period, and very few boys his age." Zara's voice rose in disbelief. "That's impossible. He was here. I lived with him." Director Hoffman responded with patronizing gentleness. "I'm sure you remember someone, dear, but sometimes children's memories can be." Her unfinished sentence hung heavy, an attempt to dismiss Zara's vivid recollections, but it only fueled their determination. This journey for truth, spurred by friendship and a father's hope, continues beyond this moment, reminding us that every story deserves to be heard.